Aloha! You're listening and watching the Dave Behar Show. Thanks for joining us wherever you may be. We're over in beautiful Manhattan Beach in the ION Manhattan Beach studios. Got a little guest with me right away. We're going to jump right in. In fact, we're going to jump serve right in with Chris CB Brown. And of course, CB only stands for CBVA. That's the first time you've heard that, right?
First time.
So Chris Brown, really known as Mr. Hermosa Beach, and well, you tell the story.
Well, I'm not sure if it's really my place to give myself an introduction, but a lifelong resident of Hermosa Beach. Was lucky enough to be born into a family where my parents really loved the beach, the ocean, and at an early age I took to surfing and beach volleyball. Really just loved all sports, but once I got through with college, gravitated towards those opportunities. When youth sports are done, unless you're a professional athlete, that's it for most sports. Surfing and beach volleyball are two things that you can do for your entire life. And so I've been lucky that I gravitated towards those things and then eventually built businesses.
I can introduce those businesses, but there's no better introduction from your experiences in those businesses that people love and have. The types of things that you bring to the community are pretty insane, but also nationwide, the inspiration to both beachgoers, beach volleyball folks, as well as the surfing community, but also all the give back activity. So, CB, what's so special about Hermosa Beach for those that are listening, watching, that are just not here?
I think all of Southern California, right, is a pretty happening and special place, and Hollywood and all of that. When you drill down and look at Hermosa in particular, there's just the intersection of so many different things. Like we were just talking about, there's obviously surfing and beach volleyball. It was also one of the real epicenters of punk rock, among many other things.
It's a quick ride to Beach Life Festival.
Sure, which I absolutely love. One of the coolest things to ever happen in the South Bay. Right. Shout out Beach Life Festival. But there are a lot of very smart and creative people, and they live in a place where the weather is nice all the time. It has allowed people to really create a lot of cool stuff over the years.
Let's talk about surfing for a minute. Besides, you've surfed worldwide. So many pictures, so many videos to prove that. But the kids, your company's teaching kids the surfing experience with Camp Surf.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's funny when I very often just cruising around town, people will come up and be like, that's amazing that you're able to make a living teaching surfing and that type of stuff. And one thing that never gets old is just watching someone catch their first wave and that happiness and that stoke that washes over them. That will absolutely never get old.
Is it the whitewash they're catching first, or is it really a wave?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, if you're outright beginner, we start them in the whitewash, and we'll spend a lot of time before they even get to the ocean on teaching safety and doing stuff on land and preparing them. Then you get a nice little whitewater that gives them that subtle push, and that's the way to get started.
It's safe. It's a safe place closer to shore.
It's just like building blocks. You start on the beach, and then you go out to the whitewater, and eventually at some point you're going to get out to unbroken waves. But for most people, that takes quite a while.
So parents on the sand cheering away with their cameras and everything about that, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, surfing, I could talk about it all day, obviously, but
we will, because you're going to have your own show pretty soon.
That will be fun, and surfing is obviously a natural thing that we would delve into. Just for me personally, surfing has been such a positive influence on my life. It kind of permeates through in a lot of ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect. For one thing, the waves here in the South Bay, if they're going to be good, it's good first thing in the morning. The wind's calm or light offshore, and that's when the surfing's good. That's why you'll see all the surfers out. The night before, when you're on that second or third beer, and you might go deep.
Well, not when you're a kid.
I'm talking about in my adult life. I can't tell you how many times I've made good decisions just based on the fact, hey, I want to be able to wake up first thing in the morning and go surfing, and I want to be able to surf well. And then you go out and surf, and then you're hungrier, and it's more likely that you'll eat healthy food. And there's just a variety of ways that it permeates into your life that I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily expect.
You're growing up in Hermosa Beach, and then you're attending the middle school, then Miracosta. And Miracosta, even competitive-wise, in the surf community.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because at the time when I was in high school, there was a real lag in competitive surfing in our area. It was just before Maricosta had a surf team. I think the surf class and the team started the year after I left. And also when I was in junior high and high school, there were no surf contests in the South Bay. So if you wanted to pursue that, you had to drive to Ventura or Huntington or something like that. And the generation before me, Frohoff, Ted Robinson, Kelly Gibson, all those guys, they did that. And they had this core group of guys, but they were traveling up and down the coast. And when we came along, nobody was really that interested in driving that far. I mean, there were a few guys who did it. And we were busy with other sports. You know, I played baseball and basketball at Costa, and I was all in on that at that time. I still loved surfing and beach volleyball, but they were just things that I did, you know, when I had time.
So, newly minted dad, but what about the other sports? I mean, you're gonna have some patience on the soccer field.
Yeah, I want to just open him up to everything and let him decide.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really my hope, and so far we're on a good path with that. I also have
How's
the
his
benefit.
hands?
His hands are great for a 2-year-old, but I have the benefit of running 25 years of youth volleyball tournaments.
Right.
So I've seen good parents. I've seen parents who maybe don't behave that great. Hopefully that gives me a blueprint, and I think, you know, the parents who were successful athletes themselves and kind of lived out what they wanted to do, they don't generally have any problem. When there is a problem that arises with parents, a lot of times it's the people that never really had an athletic career and they're kind of trying to live vicariously through their kids, and it's sad. I honestly think it's sad. So,
Right.
you know,
So
I
this is
certainly
unfettered.
hope to never do that.
Right, so this is unfettered. We can literally talk about it, but I want to hear some memorable moments of, you know, that parent-kid coaching from wherever and
You're
what's-
talking
how
bad-
crazy, how
bad
crazy-
parent?
Yeah, how crazy
You know,
have you experienced?
I've
all
experienced. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've run youth volleyball tournaments for 25 years.
Right.
So as you can imagine, with tens of thousands of kids and parents, I've run across as crazy as it gets. Now, I will say, 99.9% of the parents are awesome, and even those parents who create problems, it's almost always coming from a good place. It's just that they love their kids so much that it makes them irrational, and they can't, you know, step back from that. And so I always do my best. And my assistant, who's been with me for 20 years, there's been several times where he's been like, "Dude, I can't believe how much patience you had with that crazy mom." Like, I would have told her to F off a half hour ago, you know. But I always try to be compassionate and think about, I understand that this person really just loves their kid and wants the best for their kid. And I mean, I coached high school basketball too, so dealing with the parents in that realm is not a lot different. You know, everybody's, obviously you're so focused on your kid and you think they're the greatest and they should be playing and starting and whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And so
That's why there's the junior six-man.
Yeah, yeah. Through those experiences, I hope that I've learned a lot and I don't make those same mistakes with my kids.
What's really interesting is how we learn quite a bit from our parents growing up. And what are one of those takeaways that you know, you learned, you know, from family being in the South Bay, no matter the travels and other places you've gone, but what's the goodness behind Hermosa?
Well, like I said, I just was very fortunate to grow up in a beautiful place with parents who really loved the beach and that lifestyle, and that kind of played into that. But when I think back on it, one of my very earliest memories was body surfing. My dad would take me out body surfing, and I would get on his back and just, you know, just choking the life out of him.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he was on these tiny waves, but to me at the time it seemed huge.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll never forget how thrilling that felt. And so
The waves had to be big enough to carry two bodies.
Yeah, but I'm sure he would not have been taking me out in very big waves, especially because I was I think I was probably about 4 years old. It was just where you're old enough to kind of remember hazy memories, and that was one of them that was really powerful. And just from that early age, I was just like, wow, this is amazing, and I was all in.
So, you know, I know we're kind of jumping around, but, you know, we're just kind of getting some things launched with, you this conversation, but you would get on the road to go find waves. They just weren't all happening.
So we touched on a little bit surf competition,
Yeah.
and my friends and I at the time, in going back to the late 80s when we were kind of coming of age to where you could travel on your own and stuff, that's what we were really focused on much more so was surf travel. So not trying to go and just surf in a contest, but trying to go anywhere in the world and find the most perfect waves. When I was old enough to travel on my own, so like during college years, basically, and then it got more exotic and far flung as I got older and had a little
College
bit more
meaning that Big Ten school.
money. We'll be Big Ten next year. Yes, the Harvard of the West, USC.
No, that's San Diego State.
That's the
Cool.
Harvard of San Diego.
That's funny. All right,
But
go Aztecs.
that still to this day is one of my real passions is traveling the world. I love meeting people and experiencing different cultures and finding great waves. And I didn't get married until later in life. I'm 54 now. I got married at 47.
You're old, man.
So I had a long time where I was single and, and I had the ability to I would just look at the maps and just, it's going to be good in Hawaii next week. I'm going to go or Mexico or where.
And you got to hug the waves.
Yes, and I wouldn't change a thing, but have had the opportunity to travel a lot, and I hope to pass that down to my son. And my wife is a very keen surfer now, and we've been on some great trips together, and hopefully that's just something we can do for the rest of our lives.
How about a family surf movie?
How about it? Get it funded, and we'll do it.
That's going to cost a few bucks, but there'd be some great surf music to dial in and get the energy up, and So the lifestyle of the beach. Obviously, we've been talking about surfing, but here comes beach volleyball, and I know that you've done your tournaments, but there's also rated tournaments.
Yeah.
And there's the old CBVA.
Yeah. So
Chris Brown Volleyball Association.
So again, if you're growing up in the South Bay and you love the beach, you love surfing, that's great. But the waves are really only good in the morning, which leaves the whole rest of the day where you're not surfing,
Prime
but
time.
you could be hanging out on the beach. And so again, my parents were avid volleyball players when I was little. And from a young age, I was out there just bumping a ball around with them. But it really took a back seat. Up until the early 90s, there was no such thing as youth beach volleyball.
That's right.
There wasn't. Charlie Sakeley ran one tournament a year, the Junior Manhattan Open, and that was it. He started that, I think, in the mid-'70s.
Yeah.
And some of my
Came
friends...
after the 6-man started.
Yeah, it was like early to mid-'70s that he started that. But for decades, that was the only youth beach volleyball tournament. It's really weird to look back on now from where we are with how huge it is.
Crazy.
Yeah, and so many different groups and all the stuff. And it's great, and it's building the sport. But when I was a kid, if you were playing youth sports, it wasn't beach volleyball. So it was
It
something...
wasn't even necessarily even volleyball. I mean, of course, indoor.
Right.
If at that.
Right. The indoor clubs were just starting when I was in high school.
Right.
But that was something where we would bump the ball around just with friends when the waves weren't good or whatever. And then it was after I got out of high school and college that I started getting more interested in competing in beach volleyball.
Right.
So I don't think I played in my first CBVA tournament until I was about 18 or 19 years old. And I believe my first tournament was with your buddy Chris Roscoff.
Oh, yeah.
Shout out Chris Roscoff.
Yeah. Living large in San Diego.
Yeah. Legendary South
Chris.
Bay local. If you guys know him, you love him.
Yeah.
But it was fun, and I remember in those days it was all 2-day tournaments, which shows how old I am because we almost have none of those left anymore. But I remember for the longest time we were just grinding.
Well, there's 2-day tournaments, just not necessarily where you're going to a second day.
Right, but and there are some 2-day double elimination tournaments, but they have become the exception now, where back in the day that was all tournaments were like that. And for the longest time I remember grinding away, and my big goal was just, I wish I could make Sunday.
To make Sunday.
I just wish I could make Sunday. The way that beach volleyball works for amateur and people who may not be familiar with it, there's a rating system, and it starts out you're unrated, and then you can go to a B, A, AA.
Novice.
Right. Novice and unrated is basically the same thing. And you work your way all the way up to a AAA, which is the highest, basically like a pro level player. And so it's really fun.
Quadruple A is coming.
Well, we talked about that. It's just, it makes it really fun to try to work your way up the ladder. There's a very clear pathway, and there's very clear hurdles that you need to get over to get there. And I absolutely love that aspect.
So much history in the whole system.
Yeah.
And that's your, where'd you get by at least the end of summer? Of course, tournaments are going through summer now.
Still, as a tournament director, I have guys who are in their 50s, 60s, and they've been battling it out there, and it's like their lifelong goal is to get their B rating or their A rating. Right. To watch those people achieve their goals is amazing, especially somebody who's been at it for 25 years or something. They finally break through.
So they might have to go to another beach to get it.
Yeah, well, usually if you've been at it for that long, you've tried that many times
right.
by that point. But it's still, eventually when they get there, it's just awesome. And to that vein, just something that's kind of interesting for people, maybe some people who are older might be listening. A good buddy of mine, Paul Vigiano, just got his B rating this weekend. He's 68 years old.
I know Paul.
And so he called me up, Pastor Paul Vigiano, the pastor of disaster. He called me up inquiring if he's the oldest B in history. And I'm pretty positive that at this moment, he's the oldest B, and we're going to have to do some research to figure out if he's the oldest of all time.
That's super cool. So I have actually played on the six-man team with Paul. Yeah,
great.
I was the token insert there. But,
awesome guy.
He's incredible. I mean, playing at his level, at his age, it's beautiful.
And just a really wise man and fun-loving and really cool guy. I just consider myself very fortunate to grow up when and where I did and with the support system that I did. When you're born, it's like a lottery. And you could be a crack baby or you could be the King of England, and it's, nothing that you did to prove that worth or not. So I just found myself in a very fortunate situation. My parents are amazing. Both my mom and dad were fantastic, very supportive, very smart and successful people in their own right. But they never pushed their views or their wants on me. They were very supportive. They were always there to cheer and help me out, but they allowed me to forge my own path, which I know at times was hard for them, because I know my dad wanted me to go to law school and become a lawyer like he was, and I was kind of on that path for a period of time until I saw a different way that I knew was more my style.
You discovered fraternities.
No, it really, my fraternity life was fantastic in it added to the social aspect in college. I had a great experience with my fraternity life. I was in those years mainly at the beach. I did my best to just take classes on Tuesday and Thursday, which meant I was able to be down on the beach 4 or 5 days a week. And that was when I really kind of found my identity and knew that I didn't want to go to law school and work 100 hours a week trying to make partner in a law firm. Mm-hmm. Couldn't be happier about the decisions that I made.
Well, there's rulings out there.
It's true.
A lot of decisions.
There are.
If you're going to go paddle out to try to get the set and which way is going to be best. But kind of a little segue going into the Jimmy Miller.
That is just something that has grown so organically. Jimmy Miller was a lifelong friend of mine, one of my best friends from when I was a very young kid. We met playing AYSO soccer like just about every kid does here in Hermosa, Manhattan Beach. Just so it turned out we were on the same team. I think we were 7 or 8 years old. And I believe I've shared the story with you before, but immediately was our parents hit it off, which when you're 7 or 8 year old, that's very important. And so then they wanted to hang out all the time, which meant Jimmy and I were hanging out all the time. But then we very
How were
quickly...
the snacks?
Snacks were great. They were a very welcoming family, and I'm still very close with his parents. Jimmy passed away in 2004, tragically took his own life after a bout with mental illness. And he was this very influential and popular figure in the South Bay. And there was a huge outpouring of support, and everybody just knew that we wanted to do something to keep his name alive and kind of keep his what he was all about alive, but we had no idea what form that was going to take or where it was going to go. And so what the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation has become today has so far surpassed anything we could have dreamt of in those dark days in 2004 after he passed away. And really proud of everything that's happened. I've been on the board since the very beginning, but it's been a village coming together and everybody building this thing together. And we've been able to help, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of at-risk youth, veterans, healthcare providers that were on the front line during COVID. We've done programs all over the board. It's really fun and rewarding and exciting.
How about the annual event?
We do a few annual events. I mean, obviously, for this type of a nonprofit, you need to raise money. And so we have a gala fundraiser each summer, which is called the Benefiesta. And that usually takes place in July. And that was a great success this year. It was at a private home here in Manhattan Beach, about 300 people in attendance. We raised about $100,000. It was amazing. And then just last month, we had the Jimmy Surf Fiesta, which is a team surf contest. And we always say it's a surf contest for people who don't surf contests, because we have everything from little kids who are getting pushed in to grandpas who, can barely get to their feet. You can get assistance from a surf instructor during the contest, whatever. And it's a team concept. So it's a lot of fun. And that has really turned into a huge thing for the kids. I mean, you go down there and there's just hundreds and hundreds of young kids. All of these events, it's been fun to watch the way they have just organically grown. You put something together and you kind of have an idea in your head of where it's going to go, or you think you do, and then it just might go in a total different direction. But everything that's happened with what we said at the start was, we're going to help others while we help heal ourselves. And really, that's just remained true the whole time.
And of course, through Camp Surf. I mean, Camp Surf is helping both at-risk as well as us Groms that want to have a far better day out on the water.
I tell people that it's like, to me, it's one body, and it's like there's the nonprofit arm and then there's the business arm. And one is the Miller Foundation and the other is Camp Surf. And so we share equipment, we share instructors. A lot of people who are involved in Camp Surf or on the board are very involved in running the Miller Foundation events. So it's just worked really seamlessly where we can combine both a for-profit venture and a nonprofit.
How about a little shout out? I mean, you've got, handful of South Bay locals.
I hesitate to even start down the list because it's so long, and I will undoubtedly keep some people out. But I mean, I would have to start with the Miller family, Jeff, Nancy, and Jim, who have obviously been there since day one. All of the other board members, including the board members who have stepped off now, but Brent Broza, who a lot of people know as a local photographer, has been amazing. He's done a lot of events where he organizes it on his own and at his own expense, makes a bunch of huge prints, and then they sell them off, and the money goes to the foundation. Ty Suker, who I grew up with surfing in Hermosa, used to work at the Chart House for a long, long time. A lot of people would remember him from that. Was a professional surfer from Hermosa. He has moved down to Oceanside, but he makes it twice a month. We're at Camp Pendleton. He's there to help every time for that. Just one other person I would definitely want to mention as being very instrumental in helping with the foundation is a lifelong friend of mine, Andy Dellenbach, who he's the CEO of the foundation. He's a brilliant guy. He has really gotten us to the next level as far as fundraising and spreading kind of the gospel of the Miller Foundation. We're spreading out geographically as far south as San Diego and as far north even as Oregon, and we have plans to expand further in the future.
Chapters kind of approach.
Yeah, basically we go and kind of train their trainers, show them the program, do a couple events with them, and then we're able to just grow it in
that's
that way.
Super cool. Following the protocol, following the vibe, the whole thing. Yeah,
exactly.
That's special. That's very special. Earlier we started talking about CBVA, of course. Is it the Chris Brown Volleyball Association or is it the California Beach
Volleyball Association? Founded in 1962.
Oh, yeah.
Known as the granddaddy of all beach volleyball organizations. The short version on how it came to be was that up until that time, going way back into the 40s and 50s, there were different cities up and down the coast of California that started to host beach volleyball tournaments. The original 6, and among them were Manhattan and Laguna and Santa Barbara and Santa Cruz and San Diego. All the people that were the top volleyball players would just kind of get a list and they'd drive around and go to these 6 tournaments. Well, as it expanded, all of a sudden they had a couple years where 2 of the tournaments had, unbeknownst to each other, had been planned on the same day. Yeah. So once that happened once or twice, they thought about it and they said, why don't we get everybody together so we can work on a cohesive schedule so that we don't have this problem. And out of that was born the California Beach Volleyball Association.
And the poster.
What was the poster?
The poster that used to be printed. The schedule. Is what we referred to it. Yeah, for the longest time. This is going way back, obviously, before my
internet.
Time too.
Yeah, before internet days. You just got a printed schedule in the mail at the start of the year, and it showed you all the tournaments for the whole year. Like we talked about a little bit earlier, there's tournaments, at all levels. So hopefully there's a little bit of something for everyone. But California Beach Volleyball Association, it's a nonprofit. It's not a business. So one thing we really don't do is market ourselves or toot our own horn, because we're not a business, so we're not looking to in that way. But I think because of that, a lot of people don't really quite understand all the things that have been accomplished. And one of the main missions of the nonprofit, of the CBVA, is to grow the sport of beach volleyball. And the fact of the matter is, there would not be an Olympic beach volleyball sport. There would not be an NCAA beach volleyball sport. Like, there wouldn't be club beach volleyball or all these other things that you see if it were not for the CBVA. Because in the old days, it's changed a little bit now, but USA Volleyball was really absent. They focused only indoor. And most people would tell you they're still focused indoor, but now they do some beach programming. But for the longest time, they didn't. In the vacuum that was created by them not being around, the CBVA was the de facto group. And then at such a time where money came into the sport, this was in the early 80s, and there started to be pro events, the top group of pros kind of split off from the CBVA and said, well, we should do our own thing that's focused only on the pro events with prize money, and that was the AVP. But the AVP was born out of the CBVA. CBVA first rule book, rating system, the first schedule. Now, if you go anywhere in the country,
state-wise,
but even if you go play in Florida and you're kind of a recreational player, they will show you, there's an A tournament, there's a B. Well, we created that. Yeah. It was way before I was involved, but the CBVA created that. Right. And so there's a lot of these things that have been appropriated by other groups, and that's great. And as all of these other things have expanded, I'm often asked, are you bothered by these other groups coming in and now competing against you? Where for so long, we basically had a monopoly. We were the only game in town. But I'm not, because it really is the fulfillment of what our mission was, which our mission is to support and grow the sport of beach volleyball. And the fact that there are all these other groups doing it now is because we did a good job.
And then to some extent it's become a business. You've got club volleyball.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
Significant.
Yeah, and there is considerable money. I mean, I don't think anybody's really getting rich, so it's not like crazy money. But at the same time, I don't begrudge anybody the chance to make money. Like, if you see an opportunity where you can create something cool and make money doing what you like on the beach, why not?
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm not a hater in that way at all. I do think it's important, when you talk about the South Bay, there needs to be a city overview and kind of purview on what type of commerce, how much is allowed on the beach, because you don't want it to look like a tent city out there with tons of businesses going on. So what we have now makes sense. There's surf camps, there's beach camps, there's a little bit of activity for everybody. It's not too much.
And you can find it. I mean, obviously digitally you can find
almost
anything. And of course, it's a great pathway into beach volleyball. And there's so many beaches that it's played on now, both, from youth to adult. And, using the rating system, but also simply using the platform.
I think one of the best things about beach volleyball is all it takes is a ball and 3 friends, and you can go out there for free and play all day.
Or 7 friends.
Right. I mean, you can.
Four-man game.
That's true. or 11.
Or you can just
but-
hit the ball against the net and just kind of look funny. But,
Yeah, but along with surfing, there is no cost to it.
yeah.
You can go down to the beach, jump in the water, and go surfing as much as you want. You can then roll up the beach and pick up a volleyball and play the rest of the day, and you've spent $0 on that day and had the day of your life.
Let's talk about the good old Hall of Fame. I mean, all this is such a part of your life, the beach culture. Beach volleyball, and in Hermosa Beach is the Beach Volleyball Hall of Fame. Some would say, well, it's the CBVA Beach Volleyball Hall of Fame, but simply it is the Beach Hall of Fame either way.
Right.
Which is
And we
inducted
use-
the greats.
Yeah, we use
Yeah.
both names interchangeably.
Yeah.
And so the Beach Volleyball Hall of Fame, which before was called the CBVA Hall of Fame, started in 1992.
Yeah.
But for the longest time, all that was done was a group of people got around in a room and they voted in people. And some of those people who got in may not have even known that they were in, okay? Because again, we're talking about pre-internet days. There was no physical location for the Hall of Fame, so it just kind of existed in the ether, and those names were printed on the schedule, which you mentioned, and that was really the only way people were cognizant of who was in. So when I got involved with the CBVA, which was in the late 90s, I always had it in the back of my head, like, wouldn't it be cool if we had a physical location for the Hall of Fame? And some years later, the people from the Hermosa Beach Museum came to me and asked, we're putting together a room on beach culture and we have all this stuff on surfing, but we're having trouble getting artifacts on beach volleyball. You're the president of the CBVA. Can you help us? I think 2 or 3 different people came to me, and finally a light bulb went on. I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
They have a physical location. We have all the artifacts. What if we put these 2 together? So I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to bring that to Hermosa Beach, and that we put on this awesome induction ceremony. Now, I think this is the 12th or 13th year that we've had that ceremony. Last year, it was absolutely sold out. Big party. Everybody from the Historical Society said it was the biggest crowd they've ever seen in the museum. It was an overflow crowd spilling out all the sides. We celebrated 50th year anniversary of the Gillis. Local Sean Rosenthal, 2-time Olympian, got in, so all his Rosie's Raiders
All
were
the
there.
Raiders were there.
It was a little crazy, but it's been a great project. I think it's really shown beach volleyball in the best possible light. And at the same time, it's shown a lot of local people that we have this cool museum in Hermosa Beach that most people weren't aware of.
Right.
And we always make sure that that's part of the show, that we have the pre-party there. And everybody walks in and looks around and goes, this is so cool. I can't believe I never knew it was here. So that's exactly as it was intended, to just kind of create awareness of the museum and then show the Hall of Fame in the best possible
Those that
light.
graduate into that level of achievement, and not just on the Manhattan Beach Pier, right, as Manhattan Beach Open champion, but the overall sport. There's that question of curation.
Mm-hmm.
Here you have the museum. It's cool. But, it could be so much more space.
It's an ongoing conversation, and right now we're right in the middle of it. They are going to be doing a pretty major remodel, and they have several different things that could happen. So we're at an important juncture right now.
Yeah.
And born and raised in Hermosa, I love, we have history there. You've got the theater right there, which works perfect for what we do. My buddy Steve Napolitano, who's the mayor of Manhattan Beach, has been on me for years that, look, this really belongs in Manhattan Beach, and we could give you much
course.
more space in Manhattan Beach and all that. We'll see what the future holds. But I agree with you. I would definitely like to see even more real estate given to it. Have it grow into something even more profound for the sport.
Speaking of Steve Napolitano, he's one of those pretty good volleyball players on the beach.
Absolutely.
As a
Long
serving Manhattan
time
Beach.
AAA player,
Yeah, big
and
time.
played the Manhattan Open for many, many years, and was a really great 4-man player for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Still is. It's so ingrained into our local culture. It's fun to run into those guys and not just know them as the mayor or something that they did politically, but actually have that kind of depth of experience with them.
That's right. Yeah, so just speaking of the Hall of Fame, so what's your most memorable moments with the Hall of Fame?
Well, I believe the very first year that we held the induction ceremony, it was absolutely amazing because we got so many of the greats, like what I would call the Mount Rushmore people of the sport.
They were inducted from years ago.
Yeah, and it had been going on for almost 20 years before we ever held our first formal induction ceremony in person.
Right.
So all of those greats had been inducted a long, long time ago, but we asked them to come and be part of it. And we, in the ensuing years, have tried to go back and each year kind of shine a light on someone who was brought in before we started the induction ceremony. And so that very first one, we basically had them all. That was very special. And the group photos at the end of that night were amazing. And I ended up out with Ron Legg and Von Hagen until about 2 a.m. And that was definitely a night that I will never forget. I'm not sure if they would remember it, but I'll never forget it.
But they weren't known as the heavy partiers.
Well, Lang, maybe.
Okay.
But another thing that was very fun about that was to see these guys like Ron Lang and Ron Von Hagen. And for people who aren't familiar with beach volleyball, it would be like, we're talking about like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. Imagine right. You're with them at a Hall of Fame event, and then afterwards you're having cocktails with them. And the other Hall of Famers, people who we really looked up to, like a Mike Dodd and a Tim Hovland, and seeing how those guys looked up to them.
That's right.
It was amazing. It was very powerful.
Yeah, I think having them all in the same room, I know that a few of them are much further away and aren't able to always make the ceremonies.
So this year, to that point, we have 86-year-old Ron Lang driving down from Sacramento, and he's going to take part in a Q&A along with Jim Mangus, Butch May, and Misty May. And I'm going to moderate that panel right before the induction ceremony. So not sure if anyone listening to this wants to come and check it out, but
they'll
it's
be there.
Be great.
And they'll be there.
And we will also capture it and have it available on our website and send it out on ION and all those other good things.
I'm looking forward to seeing you do the moderating because there's some great stories.
Oh, yeah.
And they span. I mean, Butch was in the same era on the most part with Ron, but Misty. They're going to be in the middle.
Yeah, but they're all connected.
They are definitely connected.
I'm really happy with the group we ended up with, and I've already done pre-interviews with them. And I could easily do an hour on each individual. So keeping it to an hour among the 4 of them is definitely going to be challenging, but it'll be fun. And especially like Mangus, he loves to tell stories, and when he gets going, it can be really good. So I expect it to be very entertaining.
Yeah, that's great stuff. All right, we're going to be wrapping it up shortly with an ION word. And in fact, CB is going to have his favorite ION word, at least his most recent favorite ION word, and it is?
Motivation.
Oh, yeah.
I love thinking about the psychology of what makes people do things and what pushes people in a certain direction. And motivation is something that speaks to me and that I'm curious about in other people. So that's my favorite ION word.
That's pretty inspiring. Inspiration. That's just one of my many favorite ION words. But hey, listen, it's been great. I mean, we've had a great time, great history, and there's so much more. And looking forward to you sharing a lot more over ION and the rest of the platforms.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right, it's a wrap. Dave Behar Show. Have a great rest of the week, day, month, and aloha. Adios.